good to go.
Oh, we got people in the gallery.
Well, we have
I'm
Debbie.
here.
I mean, outside of you, Debbie.
Debbie is people.
She,
We are.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean.
It's been 2 years, Debbie.
I know it's
We
been
missed
2
ya.
years.
We
Yeah.
missed you.
all right, so we're good. We're good to go now. So I'd just like to call this meeting to order. It's Tuesday, March 15th, 2022 at 3 p.m. We're meeting the council chambers at the municipal building. Is there any additions to the agenda? No, perfect. Could I just have a confirmation of the agenda, please? Counselor Citizen, all those in favor? Perfect. Is there any pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Okay, perfect. Could I just have an approval of the minutes, dated March 1st? Mayor Murphy, perfect. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Awesome, thank you. We do have a delegation today with the county, and we're here to talk about our draft zoning bylaw. And your technology is working perfectly, so we have it up on the screen. So pretty much, we'll just give you the floor to start, and then council questions, we can move forward from there.
Thank you very much, Council, Mayor Murphy and the councilors. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And on the screen, we also do have joining us Anne Bean and Laura Jameson from our office. And they've been a very important part. They've been working very hard on this project. So I just wanted to give them some recognition and shout out that they have been working very hard on this project and will be working on it in the future as well as we move forward to completion of the project.
And before you get started, Bruce, I think I speak for all of council. I cannot believe how quickly you and your staff got this done, or at least a draft for us. We really appreciate it, and I understand that you've been working weekends to get through all the different townships comprehensive zoning bylaw. This has been, since 2004, realistically, that this document has been overhauled. I know that you pared it down. I think from 2004 until now, it sort of crept, and there was some conflicting language and everything else. So I think we've all got some stuff that we'd like to discuss with you, but I really do want to extend my sincerest thanks.
Thank you very much. And yeah, that's a great segue into, so this project has been on our radar for quite some time. The Blanchard Valley bylaw has been on the top of our priority of projects that we'd like to get to. So we're happy to be here and have as you said, the first draft to be able to present to you. So just as a little bit of background. So the county official plan was got our final update done in March of 2021, I believe. So, and then after that, that triggers the ability to update your zoning bylaw. And so some of the themes that we were trying to accomplish was not only being consistent with meeting the Planning Act requirements, but being consistent with the provincial policy, conforming with the official plan. But we're also trying to find ways to simplify and provide, I'll say, flexibility where it was available and provide some new opportunities for different land uses. So some of the key changes that you'll see in the bylaw compared to your old one, there are less zones. So before there were many zones, like you had, I think, four different residential categories, is down to 2. We've tried to simplify some of the commercial provisions and some of the general provisions. You'll see where we've tried to add some flexibility. And so the version that we provide you is as we said, first draft. And at this stage, we're just sort of looking for council endorsement of the draft. So this process to update your zoning bylaw does trigger a need for a minimum of 1 public open house and 1 public meeting under the Planning Act. But we have to have somewhere to start, to bring something to bring to the public to start that discussion. So that's what this is. It is the first draft, and we're trying to get, we want to make sure council is familiar with it and get your acceptance, your buy-in for the draft before we reach out to the public and start that consultation process. So the draft that you have in front of you is by no means an end product. It's not intended, it's not meant to be an end product. It's meant to be that conversation starter saying, based on the minimum requirements of the Planning Act and the OP and those types of these things, here is like the first where we're starting from. And then that's going to start the discussion both with council and the public moving forward. And there'll be lots of opportunities for consultation and input into the document moving forward. So you'll see in the document that I gave you, it is a little bit of color coded. You'll see a couple different colors in there. So the green, everything that's highlighted in green is really You don't need to pay attention to that. That's really for our own internal purposes. So as the document does get updated, because we're anticipating updates to happen, some like section numbers and other references are going to change. So everything that's highlighted in green is really a cue for us as staff that at the very end of the project, we're going to go back and double check all those green, the highlighted areas, just to make sure that all those cross references are accurate. So you don't really need to pay attention to the green. We're going to take care of that in the future. The yellow.
Wish I'd known that on Saturday, just so that the press and the people watching are aware, this is a 145-page document. And it was quite something to read through. I do appreciate the yellow highlights, but I wanted to read the whole thing for context as well.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm still studying on this original one as well, because it's a lot to absorb.
it is a lot to
And
absorb.
yeah,
Yeah,
well, I'm just gonna give everybody that heads up. I'm definitely gonna have to go through this over and over again.
and
You know.
I actually said that yesterday when I was trying to finish it off. I thought, boy, if I had another couple of extra days, I'd read through it again.
Absolutely.
I mean, I breezed through hotel definitions and marinas and that kind of thing, but I mean, I read this document because I thought the last one was such a mishmash that it really did need to be cleaned up. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the yellow parts are the actual ones where I was hoping to focus the most attention today, because those are the areas that we'll say have the most change, the most impact to how property is used in the township. And some, so other than a couple of them, you'll see a lot of what we're trying to do is add again that flexibility and some new and different opportunities for residents to how they use their property than from in the past. So, wouldn't want me to just get into it?
Yeah.
Start? Okay, sure. So I do apologize. I don't know why my laptop decided to die on you just like 2 seconds before we start the meeting, but we do have it up on the screen. You can see it.
I
So-
feel like my laptop gave your laptop some sort of virus or
Oh, don't
I don't
put it.
know.
Hopefully that's
And
not-
I've tried everything, Bruce, so yeah,
I do have a good view.
it's
of it.
okay, we can,
I
yeah.
can clearly see
Yeah.
it there, so this is great. So the first one is really, I'll just go through it very quickly. This is one that we're actually not necessarily recommending the township do. So this is a 2-year timeout. So under the Planning Act, the township actually has an option to put a timeout on accepting any different applications. And you can say after, it's really give the municipality like a breath, because a lot of times these projects can be intense and take up a lot of time. And so this provision was put in the Planning Act just to allow municipalities to say, we finally got our bylaw in place, we're just time out, nobody's allowed to change it or even apply to change it, and give us a 2-year like breather. So it's more really geared for, I'll say, urban areas or fast growth areas. It's not one that we're necessarily, again, we're not recommending the township move forward with it, but we thought we'd put it in there just so council's aware of it, that we do have this option to put a timeout. And ultimately we'll be looking for direction. This is one of those things, well, we're looking for council direction, whether you not want that in the bylaw or we can just pull it out.
That was actually one of my questions, one of my very first questions, in fact. I didn't really understand what the purpose of it was. But once we have this comprehensive zoning bylaw in place, wouldn't we want it to be sort of a living document as opposed to giving it an end date?
So this doesn't give it an end date, it's just a timeout. You say it's called, in the place had in the Hashmarks or practices a timeout. It doesn't allow a private property owner to submit an application to you to change the bylaw for 2 years.
Oh,
And that's, if I may, Bruce, that's the way I took it too. And as we all know, when we're doing things here at council, right, we're always saying no to somebody.
yeah,
And even like the last time, we have to, right, give a lot of research and stuff. And I think it's actually not too bad of an idea because it's almost like a cool down period for everybody to because when we do have such a contentious issue, it's something that, especially something like this, it's been debated. It's almost a good thing to have a cool off period, I think, for 2 years. And everything else in government is slow anyway, so.
and I was gonna say, so many things take so many years, but thank you for the explanation because I wasn't sure of the context or the gist of it, but I do agree with Tim. I don't think that it's a bad thing to have that clause.
Nope, not necessarily, and it also gives the bylaw an opportunity to have a period where you can see how it's working, how it's functioning. See,
Definitely.
are the provisions that we put in place, are they accomplishing what we need to accomplish or how we want them to work? And it doesn't prohibit somebody from ever submitting an application. So but it does make them, if you put the clause in, it makes them come to council first to say, we would like to submit a zoning bylaw amendment application, essentially asking council, can we even submit an application? Then you can say yes or no, depending on the circumstances. So it does add an extra step for somebody before they're allowed to submit an application. They would have to come and get your permission. And if you say no, for example, that no, we're not going to consider a change to a bylaw at this time, there's no appeal process. It's just no, and they have to wait for the 2 years before they could submit an application.
Like pre-consultation at the county?
So yeah, it's almost taking 2 years.
Too soon?
Yeah,
Too soon, Bruce?
that's fine. So that's just there. And then so we'll be seeking direction. You guys, the council can consider it and let us know how you'd like to proceed with that clause. So we can go down to the definitions. I think the next definitions we wanted to highlight for you were definitions about farm net. So there's 2 new definitions put in there about, I'll say, these are, yeah, again, provincial sort of efforts to provide more flexibility for how people can use prime agricultural land. So as you know, prime agricultural lands are, the lands themselves are a provincial interest to protect, to make sure that those lands are there for future generations, that we're not developing on those prime agricultural lands, so that they're going to be there for food production. But if the province has recognized that a lot of farmers are looking to use their lands in unique ways, and there's a lot of, we'll call them either value added on farm diversified uses or agricultural related uses. So these are new sort of terminologies that are being put in place to allow more flexibility on those what is called prime agricultural land. So your class 1, 2, and 3 soils. The township doesn't have very many of them, so it's only going to affect a small portion of your township, but it does would allow some other uses that could be allowed on a prime agricultural property without going through the zoning bylaw amendment. So for example, the township recently had a proposal to have a cidery, and so that would be considered an on-farm diversified use under the new proposed bylaw. It would be allowed to be permitted as of right with no zoning bylaw amendment necessary. Just be an on-farm diversified use permitted in a prime agricultural area. So previously, it actually would not have been permitted both under the PPS or your zoning bylaw, and it would not in the prime agricultural areas have a relatively difficult track to get approved. Now it's just going to be allowed as a right, provided.
Whoops.
I think the cideries was in a rural area, the one that we permitted, so it was fine. But provide that is limited to like a 1 hectare area, so they still providing that protection for the land for the most part of it, but recognizing that farmers do and have other business interests, and they want to be able to use their land to make money, and this is so they're saying, well, the one hectare of land on that farm or that primary culture uses, you can have some additional flexibility and some additional uses on there. All right, if we can keep going in that, I think we can jump all right to the general provisions. I think, well, most of these definitions that we put in place are fairly common. Either they already in your existing zoning bylaw are very common to other definitions. All right. So if we can scroll down the first yellow that we see. All right, thank you. So sleep cabins, this is an interesting provision. Right now, I believe in the township bylaw, sleep cabins are not permitted. And the way that the general provisions are written, any accessory structure cannot contain a habitable room. So a habitable room is anything that's used for eating, sleeping, or food preparation. And as we know, being in a rural area, Bonner Valley has a lot of lakes and waterfront. Bunkies and sleep cabins are very common to see on the landscape. And so this provision would allow somebody to build a sleep cabin if they have a property that's bigger than 1 acre. So you still have to have a sizable property that's on waterfront, and have building a sleep cabin that does not exceed 18 square meters. So around 200 square feet, 194 square feet, and 4.5 meters or about 15 feet in height. And sleep cabins are defined as I didn't highlight in the definitions, but it's defined as just a sleeping only. So it would not permit any washroom or kitchen cooking facilities. There would be no plumbing that's permitted to be hooked into it. It's literally would be a building, just put some bunk beds or a bed in there for use for sleeping purposes.
Wouldn't be turned into a cottage.
It's not going to be turned into a cottage or.
So why are they not allowed to be rented or leased?
So
Where are they gonna eat and go to the bathroom?
yes,
Well, what if I have a bunkie and I use it kind of, not as an Airbnb, but you get my gist. Why could I not allow people into my home?
Like a bed and breakfast. kind of.
Yeah, thank you.
So bed and breakfasts are a specific use that's permitted elsewhere in the bylaw. So most of your waterfront areas, a bed and breakfast is not a permitted use.
Okay, but
So if you were leasing your entire property out, it would go with that, your building. I think the intention is that it is not just the bed, just your bunkie that you're using to rent out. So it's not becoming, I think it's a density control issue almost. So we're allowing them down to on a 1 acre size property. Allowing that increase of density it is gonna still have impacts on your well and septic, because the more people you have on a property, then obviously your usage of your well and septic is gonna go up. And it's just to have that control. And also with sleep cabins, if you are individually renting them out as a business that you're doing that, they are also under the Rutherford County District Health Unit requirements for all your water treatment. You have to report, do a water testing and water treatment control and everything. So it is meant to be just for your own personal use if you have guests, or if you have people that you're occasionally using it to house additional people that your cottage can't. It provides a little bit of flexibility for that.
So I guess at what point does so if someone has like a bunkie on their property and it's designated for say storage, primarily time, but at what point does it become a sleep cabin versus storage facility?
What they're actually using it for.
So it's the use at the time. So even if they use it, say someone wanted to put a mattress or whatever in a bed in their bunkie, but primarily they just have their kayaks and stuff in it. Then is it primarily use would be storage, or is it actually just deemed the bunkie because that one person slept in it for that one weekend?
It is, so for example, using the current bylaw in place where bunkies are not permitted, if even for one night, somebody goes to sleep in it, it can be considered a violation of your zoning bylaw because accessory buildings cannot be used for habitable rooms. So if somebody's using it for sleeping, even for that first night, it's being used in contravention of your zoning bylaw.
But the enforcement of this I see is, and we've talked about this a lot, right, Bruce? Enforcement, I mean, people are going to do what they're going to do. And, I think bunkies are so widely used on lakes like Lake Simcoe, and they are rented out. And the owners of the cottage then allow people into their homes, they almost like a B&B, they bring in coffee and pastries in the morning and allow people to shower. And so I totally appreciate this. And we'll get to secondary dwellings, which was my favorite part of this, by the way. You know how hard I've been lobbying for secondary dwellings here, but I do see this as an enforcement thing. Probably not something that our bylaw officers would go out to every time,
Councilor Rosa?
Yeah. I see an issue with this because it says sleep cabins are not permitted on water bodies identified at capacity.
Correct.
We all know that there's existing sleep cabins already all around Lake Clear. So I really have a hard time, if we've allowed people to do it, how can we all of a sudden say no to somebody else? That's the problem I'm having with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So with any use, whenever we're changing bylaws, that's absolutely a consideration. And so how it works under the Planning Act again is uses that pre-existed a bylaw coming into force. If they call them grandfathered, is sort of like the common vernacular, or legal non-conforming uses are called. So if they were legal before this bylaw or whatever bylaw came into place, then they are forever protected. They don't lose that legal non-conforming status regardless of what the new bylaw says. They have a protection under the Planning Act. So the tricky part for that is when that bunkie was created, was it legal? So for example, your current bylaw doesn't permit them. So if that bunkie was constructed when the bylaw prohibited, it is an illegal structure and it will still be illegal under this bylaw. It will not fix those old problems. If that bunkie, for example, was created in the 60s, or before the township, doesn't have to go back that long, but before the township had zoning bylaws and it was a legally existing structure, it will continue to be a legal structure, and this bylaw again will not affect it.
But I think what Jack is saying is that we've allowed them for years on end and allowed boathouses, et cetera. So how do we now take that privilege away because we're putting in this new bylaw? I think that's,
Well, the thing is,
Where you
the thing
were going.
is, we've been all sitting around council here, and I'm not gonna name which one, but just recently we allowed a couple of sleep cabins around Lake Clear that got reworked.
right, well, that were boathouses,
Yeah, we're boathouses, but are now come sleep cabins.
yes.
So realistically, that was in contradiction of our zoning bylaw.
So I don't know those specific
No,
instances,
but-
but, so your bylaw right now doesn't permit it. So what is being permitted here is actually adding flexibility where it didn't previously exist. So right now, your bylaw says no boathouses. Right now, your bylaw says no sleep cabins, no buggies. And this provision is actually introducing more flexibility for every waterfront property other than Lake Clear.
When, okay, no boathouses.
But you've never been able to have new boathouses. so-
I'm sorry, addition, I shouldn't have said new.
No,
That was-
because what we
I made
did
a
was,
mistake.
approve the
Conversion.
Sorry,
expansion of.
I'm sorry,
Conversion.
an expansion of something that, as you say, probably was constructed before we were born, right?
Absolutely.
So,
But that's fine
Sorry.
in existence. The difference is this is just saying we, as a council, we can't approve a sleep cabin, but someone can go and renovate an existing boathouse and build, redo the structure, whatever, and then their deem of use to us is just a rezoning that they're just renovating
is,
it. Like their intended use can be whatever their intended use is, but our bylaw is clearly stating that they can't use it as sleep.
Correct.
And
And that-
everything comes down to that we can't enforce it. We don't have the money to enforce it or anything.
but that would be considered legal conforming, which is where we went with the boathouse that was sort of renovated, for lack of a better term.
Well, it was changed.
It was changed, yeah.
From a boathouse.
So sorry, I shouldn't have said that. We didn't approve a new one. It was simply a renovation.
And just for that, so again, under the Planning Act, that's one of the specific powers that the Committee of Adjustment has, is to consider applications to expand non-conforming uses. So you have, or buildings, so you have a non-conforming building, and it's right in the Planning Act saying, they do have, these existing non-conforming buildings have special protection status. And one of the powers that your Committee of Adjustment has is to approve expansions to those. So the minor variance, it's right in the Planning Act to allow that to happen. Given you meet certain tests and criteria. So what this would allow somebody to construct a bunkie on their property as a right without having to come to council for any minor variance or zoning bylaw, provided it's not on
So everywhere in Bonaire Valley except for Lake Clear.
waterfront lots only, not your rural areas.
What I mean was all the other lakes. Bonaire River, Constant Lake, Silver Lake, you name it all around. They're all allowed to do it without coming here.
But I think for rural, the secondary dwelling takes care of that,
Yeah.
that disparity between. Which I'm so excited about. I think this is gonna be a game changer for people in our community that wanna keep their parents or whomever living on their properties.
But 1 acre lot is gonna not allow a lot of it. It's gotta be a 1 acre lot.
That's a big
That's
chunk,
a-
really.
it is.
You know, yeah.
So we're all done with this category then?
Oh, I don't think we were done. I was just getting ahead of myself, sorry.
It just, we're basically, we're not changing the way it was on Lake Clear, it just, it is what it is on Lake Clear. Because it's at capacity.
Correct. So the provisions for Lake Clear the properties around Lake Clear would not receive this new flexibility for those being offered to other waterfront properties within the township.
So why the 1 acre, Bruce?
So this comes under the both the PPS and the official plan. So with regards to density, and so 1 acre is the minimum lot size for any new residential use. And it's actually recommended that new residence uses be 2.5 acres. So problems with like all lots to be 1 hectare, 2.5 acres where possible. we've worded it in our official plan that new lots can be considered for 1 acre, but you have to have support by a hydrogeological study to make sure that the density is not getting too great, that you still have a potable source of water for both quality and quantity, and that also your septic system that there's enough room where it is, that the increase in nitrates and phosphorus is not going to have any negative impacts off-site. So generally, if you have a property that's less than 1 acre, we're saying it's just too small and we're not promoting an increase of density on lots that are less than 1 acre.
But you mentioned something else, and I'm thinking of the Golden Lake now. There's a lot of lots that are like a 1/4 acre, but they were cottages. But now maybe they're converting them into residences. Is there anything that prevents that?
There is not. So that is currently permitted. And so all these.
It's permitted on Lake Clear too.
It's permitted on Lake
I was,
Clear.
okay, there is irony there.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's-
But why would we want to permit it though? Irv?
Well,
Well,
I mean, you get your cottage and now you.
No, but why would we want to prevent it though?
Oh, I don't, I'm just
No.
asking,
Well,
I'm just asking if this is gonna prevent that, because you need an acre and you need.
It would only prevent them from building a bunkie. So with your property, you have inherent, if you have a previously existing or previously permitted lot, you have the right to build on it. That's your basic right, whether you build a cottage on it or whether you build a dwelling on it. That is essentially, you have a residential building lot, you're allowed to build on it. So this bylaw would not change that fact regardless if you have 1 acre
3,500.
or half
That's
acre.
right. All
It's
right.
not to prevent you on a 1/2 acre going from 1,000-foot cottage to 3,500.
Correct.
But you can't have a bunkie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotta love the Planning Act.
And that's applicable on Lake Clear as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, shipping containers. So I can't off the top of my head remember exactly what your existing provision is with regards to shipping containers, but I have a feeling that right now they are not permitted in the township. So a lot of townships don't permit them. There was I'll say a period of time where municipalities all across the county in Ontario were just doing outright ban of no shipping containers, or those, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, the sea can containers that people are putting on their property using for storage buildings. So this is provision would allow a shipping container, provided that certain conditions are met for certain zones of property. So this provision would allow a shipping container storage trailer to be used as an accessory building if you have property in the rural zone, the agricultural zone, the commercial zone, or an industrial zone. So it permitted, provided that you meet the following setbacks and buffering requirements. So for example, there's an increased lot line, setback 20 meters from the front lot line. There's a requirement for visual screening, whether it's like vegetation or berm or fencing, essentially just to try to minimize that visual impact that might have from either the road or from your neighboring properties. Just so because that was the biggest concern with these containers, was that they were unsightly and people didn't like to see them on their neighbors' properties, or as they're driving down, they don't think it was aesthetically pleasing. So this would tries to find again that happy medium, so allow people to have them as their storage buildings, provided that they're appropriately screened and sort of.
So we have discussed certain issues about these before. So was it just that it was not in our bylaw, or is it, because I don't think there was a regulated thing within our municipality at all.
Yes, so if it's not in the bylaw, it's not permitted.
It's not permitted.
Correct.
So
Has to
so
be in
we
the bylaw to
have
be permitted.
we have shipping containers ourselves as a municipality
I
own
was
them
gonna say,
throughout the township. So we are actually ourselves in contravention to our own bylaw or to the rules of this.
EGC
Of the
is,
current, yes.
So does the.
There, write that down there.
Works the-
I didn't want to find out. It's good to have her back. eh?
it's just a
I
strange,
know, I
The road
know.
department has about 4.
you
Yeah.
wouldn't even think,
No,
because those sea cans are such good storage. I would never even have thought that they would be prohibited unless allowed.
but does that not still fall into, because they're not really. And it kind of ties in with the RV deal, right? Because you can pick them up and move them whenever it suits. Because there's really no, unless you see trees growing through the center of them, you cannot tell somebody that they're not just using it as
A
a storage, not storage, but as a shipping container. because what they're used for is to fill them full of goods, right, and send them on down the way. That's why they're waterproof.
But if this, but I guess my question would be, if this is, say, added into her zoning bylaw, then for the residents that currently have them, then when they would technically become a taxable asset on them.
Correct.
So then when MCAP eventually goes around again, then that they would be looking at for assessment. So then we're gonna be adding more taxation on our ratepayers.
But there again, once it's into a spot where you have the gravel up to it and you're using it as a garage, now it has to be part of our building. Because you need a building permit. Yeah, so that's what I'm getting at. So that's one of those fuzzy areas. You do need a building permit if it's used as such, and then it still has to require certain setbacks in our building, right? I've been paying attention. So, no, but I just know that we've discussed this before, and seeing it in the zoning deal.
But then for the process of this, for people that currently have them, then is it, like, so when it goes out to say, like every single individual in the township that we're reviewing the comprehensive zoning bylaw, then would they have to each individually have to submit their CCAN?
So that goes back to the question of whether they're legal non-conforming or not. So you have to determine, when was the CCAN placed on property? Was it placed before before there was bylaws? And if it was placed ahead of time, then it's again legal non-conforming, they're fine, they're protected, they're fine to go. If that CCAN was placed in contravention to the township bylaw, so it's not legal, does not have that protection, then yes, they would have, technically, they would, if there was a complaint, the township would need to enforce the bylaw. They would need to either come into line with the provision or apply for relief from the bylaw to council for either zoning amendment or minor variance.
But I think once again, Bruce, you just said the magic word. My computer's back. Check yours, Bruce, check yours.
Still dead.
So again, we're talking about enforcement, and in a township of this size, I mean, it would be, neighbors complaining about neighbors, but it'll be interesting when MPAC does eventually go back out, which, we're not probably going to see for another year or so. It'll be interesting to see what those CCANs increase. I know from our own standpoint, building the garage, our taxes just went up exponentially. So it's interesting anyway.
And if I could just further to Councillor question or comment regarding building permits,
Just comment then.
kind of say Tim, sure. Tim.
Sure, here, I'll turn
Yeah.
here.
The courts have already decided, this has been obviously gone through courts for, they've been around for a while, and they've already been determined that they are a structure and the building code is applicable to these CCAN. So even though you don't actually, you just essentially pick them up and put them on the
That's right.
property, they are still subject to the building code and you have to get a building permit.
And that's what I was getting at. So we are following certain regulations here. It's just not in our zoning.
Well, yeah. So this will just allows more flexibility again.
We're only breaking a little bit of law.
No, you're not. I'd say you're allowing more flexibility. We're proposing to allow more flexibility where it didn't previously exist. So right now they're prohibited everywhere, and under the proposal is allowing them under certain conditions.
But I think I go back to my opening statement where, and you broached it as well, the official plan has been in action. I mean, God almighty, I was the warden. So that was years ago that we had that public meeting in the storm in Pembroke. And I think it just got passed last year. So this has been a configuration of very confusing language. In fact, some paragraphs actually negated other paragraphs in the previous bylaws. So I think, we were interpreting things the way we thought they should be, but now we're realizing, no, that this is the verbiage and this is where we're going, what road we're going down. I'm so excited. I'm going to bring it up on my
Jack, go
laptop.
ahead.
What about LSR? I know it's not listed in here. You just said rural and agricultural and commercial.
That's correct. So typically your LSR are all on private roads and they're all going to be along waterfront development for the vast majority of the time. And so yes, a ship, it is not being proposed to have a shipping container in an LSR zone. based on some of those, just because of the lot size, a lot of these setbacks
Mhm.
aren't gonna be able to fit on an LSR zone. And again, is intended to try to negate some of those, let's say, visual impacts of these,
Okay,
these structures.
It's funny because shipping containers are actually used as pop-up food trucks in Toronto.
For sure, and I've seen some, been part of a whole bunch of presentations where people are using them for homes and.
Tiny homes.
Yeah, tiny
I've seen
homes,
the tiny-
and they paint
Putting-
them
putting
and they,
facades on, absolutely,
yeah, dress them up.
I guess. So I think this is meant, again, so this is, so, and this would not prevent that. Should be clear on that. This is only for when it's being used as an accessory building. If somebody wanted to take a whole series of shipping containers and convert them and use them as a, not even a tiny home or a big home or tiny home, whatever they want, then this would not stop that. They would still be permitted to undertake that process. This is only when, we're talking about when somebody's taking a shipping car or container, putting on the property and using it for their storage.
like a monkey,
Like-
like a monkey.
I just want to have a question, but just change the subject, but my son-in-law was a mechanic and had quite a bit of tools and blah, blah, blah. And they lived with Brecken and then they moved, sold and bought a house in Pembroke. And guess what I got in my backyard? A shipping container full of all his stuff.
Perfect, so we'll move on to backyard chickens.
Yeah.
So there's a new policy in the official plan that encourages what we call urban agriculture, and saying municipalities can come up with different provisions as they see fit for their municipality. I know Monash Valley, you already have a chicken bylaw.
We have a chicken bylaw.
We do.
We have taken those provisions and put them in here, and you'll see that, I think bylaw 2016-24 is your chicken bylaw, so this is carrying that forward, we're not changing it. The only change for you would be, you will have that we're proposing, again, I was from the subject council, it would have the very first provision with regards to urban beekeeping. So,
Which I found very interesting and is certainly something that is very popular right now. I agree up to 4 hives. I don't think we'd want to see, 30 hives in somebody's backyard in Eganville, but that's very interesting.
And no way, shape or form am I against, the beehives. The only problem is sometimes the hives relocate when they're in an urban area and into people's homes. I've seen that happen before.
Rafters.
And people have seen the honey dripping out of their drywall.
Yeah.
So that's something that I don't know. if
Never
anybody-
heard of that.
Yeah.
I've actually
They
have,
go in through the-
actually right in the roof of their house.
Yeah.
They come in, but anyway, so the backyard, so
Still no roosters. though.
That's R1, R2.
Yeah.
yeah, you need a rooster. or something.
No roosters.
No roosters.
Oh,
I think that's great.
Discrimination.
Per lot, so I think this is the secondary, it's getting to the start of the secondary dwelling. So right now in the township, there's the bylaw only allows one dwelling to be, or one building containing a dwelling to be constructed on a property. And then that we can go down, so you'll see all in yellow, 3.92 is secondary dwelling units. And so this is finally, or as Mayor Murphy indicated, it's been many years of this trickling down. So it started again with the province introducing legislation where it's actually mandatory for municipalities to allow a secondary dwelling unit in properties, whether for a single, a semi, or a townhouse property. And that secondary dwelling unit can either be, we'll call them like a basement apartments or like built within the existing structure itself, or it could be in a separate structure, whether it's standalone, or it could be what a lot of people call coach houses. You'll have like the garage underneath and the loft up top. So the secondary dwelling can just be on the property, whether it's again in the dwelling or in a separate structure, it doesn't matter. So for the way that this bylaw is written, so it implements the policies that from the legislation and then also from the official plan. So on every property that is on full services, so for Eganville, you are in full municipal water and municipal sewer, you're allowed to have a second dwelling unit on your property, full stop. You can come in, get a building permit, there'll be no additional process for you. It's just allowed as of right. So for the rural areas, this is where it gets a little complicated, but like for servicing constraints, again, what we talked about earlier about making sure that people in the rural area, that you have suitable water both for your own needs, but also that you're not going to have an impact on your neighbors. So we're getting into those lot area considerations. So for secondary dwellings on properties that have rural services, so well and septic, again, they are not permitted if you have less than 1 acre. 1 acre is the bare minimum. If you have less than 1 acre, you don't qualify to getting a secondary dwelling. If you have between 1 acre and 0.8 hectares, on the screen, there's 3.9.22. So if you fit within that, oh, sorry, I think I said.
Greater
Okay.
than 0.4 hectares, but less than 0.8.
0.8, yes. So if you're between that 0.4 hectares, which is 1 acre, and 0.8, which is 2 acres, you can consider it, but you have to do a minor variance application and you have to do a hydrogeological study to show that your well and water and your septic system is suitable. So you can do it, but you need that minor variance with that study to show good water septic.
Just fill, if anybody can fill me in, does anybody know what a hydrogeological study roughly costs these days? Is there any
Lots.
estimate?
Lots, not cheap.
No, just as a, I don't know what, if anybody has had one done.
No.
Nobody? I don't think it sounds cheap anyways.
So my understanding, so again, we'll go by the site-specific property and
Yeah.
what they do. So for the, one of the advantages of when you're adding a secondary dwelling, so a lot of what adds cost to these hydrogeological studies is when you have to have a well drilled for the
Yeah.
study. So a lot of these houses already have existing wells, so they can use that to do your test. So it'd just be having that water pumped and tested for figure out your pump rate, so your quantity,
So how many gallons per minute are coming in, as long as it sustains the other?
and then your
Person
water
side.
quality. So they would do,
Yeah.
and we're not looking for, there's also, you'll see in the wording of it, it's not called a hydrogeological study, we're just calling it an evaluation. So we're not looking for like the full gamut of everything. We're just looking for a basic reading, an expert out there who knows about groundwater and how it works,
Yeah.
to make that call saying, yes, you have enough water to accommodate it, and yes, you have a lot area that you can have that increase of septage without.
I was gonna say, but now, over the years, Bruce, seeing, with the different styles of septic systems out there, a lot of them have gotten a lot smaller, right? Since the beginning. I remember them, 40 years ago, big bulkhead and the header was massive, and now they go down to a smaller system. So is there any provisions in that, say if you were, okay, I just wanted to make sure we're not cutting people off because of certain sizes and
So
stuff.
absolutely, there is technology, as you said, out there that is changing for septic systems, and a lot of them are called tertiary systems, where they have nitrogen reducing components built into them. And so, for example, if somebody wanted to have a 2 acre property and they wanted to add it, but the calculation came in and said, for using a class or a conventional septic system, your nitrates are going to be too high, then we have accepted in the past, and we've done for subdivisions as well, where it is approved on the basis of having those tertiary septic systems being installed.
So there will be kind of exceptions within, so people aren't just constrained anyway, I just want to make sure that there's exceptions in it for people with certain.
I just want to say, I'm glad to hear that you didn't, study didn't include groundwater flow or anything like that. If you got a well and the well pumps X number of gallons per minute.
But the reason why I'm asking is if someone was on a threshold and you're gonna spend a lot of money on a hydrogeological study and have all the stuff evaluated, and it just ended up where you weren't gonna fit the traditional style of system, that you still earned out a big pile of money and able to still to get your secondary on it.
Correct.
It's basically what we're getting at too with
Yeah.
with the severances and stuff. You don't want somebody to put out a big pile of money and then realize, oh, I can't do this now, just for, kind of a sitting on the gray area worth of
I was just going to equate it to that as well, but I didn't want to come down on Bruce again about the pre-consultation fees.
well, and that's what exactly, because we don't know everybody's situations, and unfortunately, in the next little while, the situations are gonna be more common where the money's not gonna be.
So everyone's
there.
fairly comfortable
Yeah.
with that one, so.
And my apologies, Mr. Chair, I had a sneeze stuck. And I didn't know what to do, and I don't want people to think I have COVID because I don't.
Tim timed you, so I'll take that in that report.
It's off. There
So Nick, can you just move on to the next one?
He did it with a straight face too.
So, can you just touch on one, so just in the very last provision, like, that's not secondary waterfront lots, so. Again, this one does not apply for at capacity lake, so Lake Clear, if you're within 300 meters of Lake Clear, you would not qualify to have a secondary dwelling unit on your waterfront property. For every other waterfront property, again, it can be considered, provided all those criteria are met, and you do again need that minor variance that we talked about before, regardless of your lot size, to demonstrate again that the increase in density is not going to have an impact. But for waterfront lots, we're not just looking at drinking water quality, and we're also looking at making sure there's no impacts on the surface or about the receiving water body, what that surface impact, whether it's the lake or a river. So it's that's why it's a little bit different for waterfronts compared to if you're out in the rural area. But if you had a big, say, 2 acre or even a 1 acre waterfront lot on Constance Lake, for example, this policy is there that with a hydrogeological study, you can consider to have a secondary dwelling built on your property, whereas previously it would not be permitted. Next one I want to bring to your attention is, we'll get to that. That's all about recreational vehicle. All right.
Everybody's favorite topic.
So this, obviously, we've had some discussions previously about how to, what type of provisions the township would like to put in here. And so I've tried to take those discussions that we've had and put them into an actual bylaw form, how it would work. I just did want to put a caveat that, like, a lot of the conversations that we've had, there have been concerns about enforcement and how can we enforce it. And a lot of the provisions that we're putting in place here, I fully recognize that there are potential issues with regards to enforcement. And I know the township has previously considered a licensing bylaw, and you directed not to proceed that. So that's why we've drafted it by this way. But a lot of the provisions that we have in here would be easier to enforce through a licensing bylaw. So, but with that said, we go. So we can go run through what the proposal is, and I hope I've captured a lot of what we've discussed previously. So right now, the township bylaw is the occupancy of recreational vehicles is not permitted. This would allow it on certain cases. Again, you'll see under 317.42, this recreational vehicle occupancy would not be considered for properties around Lake Clear. So this would apply for vacant lots of record in the rural, the agricultural, the limited service residential, which does include the waterfront lots. It says 1 recreational vehicle may be occupied and stored, provided that the location of the recreational vehicle complies with all setbacks, including the water setbacks. That's the 30-meter water setback of the respective zone. So for on all those vacant lots within the township in either the rural, agriculture, limited service residential zone, regardless of property size, you don't have to have the 1 acre minimum. Instead of having a dwelling, if your property is vacant, you can put you'll be allowed to put a recreational vehicle on that property and occupy it.
But Bruce, are you saying that they're not going to be permitted on vacant lots within 300 meters of, we'll call it Lake Clear? We've already got recreational vehicles on empty lots. We have several on some lots. And again, I don't know how you disallow something that's been allowed since, time immemorial.
So bylaws are discriminatory. There's no other way to put it. They do put restrictions on property and how people can use their property. That's just the nature of the bylaw. And so the current bylaw already has that in there. So again, if you had some use that existed before the bylaw was created, they have legal non-conforming status, they would be permitted, they are protected under the Planning Act. So you have a legal non-conforming structure that exists, whether it's a recreational vehicle or a bunkie or a boathouse, whatever that is, they have protections under the Planning Act, and that will go on to this bylaw, supersede this bylaw or any other future bylaw that the past.
But if they're, but if they're legal conforming, but if there's if the interpretation is that it was prohibited before, so then they can't have a recreational vehicle or anything.
So, we did have, and here's a question for you, sorry, Bruce, just to kind of throw it in there. So when our bylaw was issued before it was rescinded, would that be a period of,
No,
No.
it never came into effect.
Yeah.
didn't come into effect?
No.
So that, okay,
The bylaws there.
so
It's a good
that's,
question, but no.
no, at the time and had that, oh,
Where did this 300 meters come from? I mean, if you got a trailer 300 meters from the lake, you really don't have.
Well, that's,
That's right from the official plan, that's right from the provincial policy as well. So sensitive lake policies apply to lands within 300 meters of the at capacity. I keep on saying sensitive, that's the old terminology. Now, at capacity lakes now. So if the policies apply to 300 meters from the boundary of the at capacity lake. So that's where it started from like from the provincial guidelines, and that worked its way into the official plan, and now was working its way down into.
Jack, go ahead.
so basically, this goes back to discussion we've had for a number of years here, that what our interpretation of our zoning bylaw was based on RVs around the lake. And that's where I see this all goes back to, the interpretation that we had and what we had discussed when we had our current not bylaw, but our building inspector and what our interpretation was based on theirs. But what you're saying is the interpretation of our existing bylaw was the same as this right now. That's that you couldn't be at capacity lakes, or what is?
This is a brand new provision,
Mhm.
so. I'm gonna try to choose my words carefully here.
Yeah,
So the way that people have been using their trailers on property currently, whether or not you want to make a determination of whether it's conforming or non-conforming. So again, this comes down to where there is enforcement is necessary. So if the township ends up being in a position where there is a complaint on a property and you are asked to go out and enforce the zoning bylaw. Step number one is to determine what's legal on the property and what is illegal. So that would be the first provision. So your bylaw enforcement officer would go out, look at what's on the property, and then have to make a determination of whether or not there's an infraction to the bylaw or not. And so step one would be determining whether it has legal non-conforming status. So if it has legal non-conforming status, then it's okay to go. And there's a whole series of tests under the courts that they would have to do to demonstrate, to provide that evidence that it is legal non-conforming. So for these existing trailers, they would have to be able to demonstrate that it was legal at the time, that when they brought the trailer in and started occupying or doing whatever they're using, it was legal at the time. So and then ultimately, it's not going to be up to your bylaw enforcement or even the township to decide what's legal, non-conforming or not. If it ever comes to it, fortunately, the only way that's determined is through the courts. And it is up to that stage where that evidence is presented and the determination is made.
so basically it boils down to whoever the court's legal interpretation of the current bylaw at that time when that trailer was put on.
That's where municipalities often will get a legal opinion ahead of time before they even proceed down that enforcement avenue to take it to court, say, what are our likelihood of being successful here? So if we have a complaint, we have to deal with it. They'll, bylaw enforcement will look at it. Most likely you'll get a legal opinion ahead of taking somebody all the way to court. And your lawyer will be able to give you recommendations of whether or not they recommend the township to proceed with this. Enforcement.
so my question is, when was the last time it was legal?
I bet you we would never be able to find that.
You wouldn't know.
No, but that's what I mean. So if we didn't know we don't know when the last time it was
Well,
legal, that would
Tim-
mean anything would
Tim,
be illegal.
Tim, we don't even know if it's illegal right now. So that's the question you have.
Well-
right?
No, but what I'm getting at, shall this go in, right? When was, because in order for the trailer or RV, okay, that we're calling now, to be legal in that spot, it would have had to have been put there when it was deemed legal to do so. And if it was put there any date thereafter, then it would be considered illegal and subject to the courts could be told to be removed.
But I think.
So say if it was 1980 when it was fine and you got an 1987 RV, well, you're in contradiction of this and they would legally be able to make you move it.
But would I even
Am I
ask?
not, am I right or wrong?
It's, unfortunately, it's not that easy.
Okay, I
I'm
don't
just
even
looking
know
at-
if I'd ask the question, okay, so. I'm not from here, I buy a lot on Lake Clear, I have this beautiful RV, I bring it up, I park it on my land. Am I even checking with the municipality? Guarantee you I am not. I'm not, I bought a piece of land, I have a trailer, and that's what I'm doing. So I think that this is, you know, you use the word discriminatory, and I totally agree with that word, because this is just not fair to those people that are already using their land in a manner that seems to me to be responsible. And I know that, you know, even the, you know, the pro trailer and the four trailer people, they've even come to some compromises. So I think that that one paragraph is extremely unfair to those people. And I think that there's got to be a better way. And I do agree with Tim, like, so I moved here in 2000, I wouldn't have come in to see the CAO or the building inspector. I would have parked my trailer.
But for that, like at capacity calculation, back when it was D at capacity, then we're like recreational vehicles were probably still around. So was that taken into calculation for the development? Like, so the consideration to make it at capacity, or just the housing would have been part of it?
Sure, so there's a whole series, I'll try to answer a whole series of questions here. So to answer Mr. Patrick, your question first, so at the county, we don't look into the back history of why it was deemed at capacity lake, or all that background information, that why it was, or what the, you know, the science behind it is. We are informed by the ministry that it is an at capacity lake, and then that we're under the PPS, and then under your official plan, if everything trickles down, there are certain regulations or prohibitions that come with that designation, or land uses that come with that designation. So I can't answer your question about all the reasons or what calculations were done. All I can say is that we've been informed by the ministry that it is not capacity lake, and that the therefore different policies are applicable for Lake Clear. Regarding the former use of whether, you know, just because it's a 2007 trailer, that means it was built and put there in 2007. Fortunately, it's not that easy to determine whether it's legal non-conforming or not, because again, that provision of legal non-conforming goes with the property and not the person, and or that actually even that trailer itself. So somebody could have been saying, had a trailer, been using that property since the 60s, but obviously that trailer is long gone, they've upgraded, but they've been using that property for the
To
trailer.
that same extent, but the thing is,
So it's not just as easy as, oh, that's a trailer, 2020 trailer, therefore it doesn't meet our bylaw. It's not that simple, because the use goes back. much later.
and that's what I mean, there's a lot of aggressive people out there, and there will be aggressive people out there going after, and we've seen it, right? And I just don't wanna see anybody getting into hawk over something.
But I really have a problem with this, and they're probably happening in Lake Clear or another lake. They're farms that have been in the family since 1800. And now all of a sudden, a family member wants to put a trailer near the lake, and they gotta stay 900 feet back. So it's ridiculous, ridiculous.
So
So Bruce, you're gonna answer.
Yeah, and for Mayor Murphy's question, again, so as staff, it's our responsibility to sort of like advise council based on the policies in place. So whenever you're passing a bylaw, under the planning act, you're required to conform to the official plan. And in this case, the official plan policy for Lake Clear, there was a specific policy that was actually even predates the current county official plan. So back when, I can't remember if it was, the township is
Sebastopol.
out in Sebastopol. So Sebastopol had its own official plan. So predating Bonnechere Valley, pre-amalgamation, had a policy in there saying on Lake Clear, the only thing permitted uses on a property are single detached dwellings. So that policy has been carried through from Sebastopol all the way forward. So if council now wants to consider allowing uses on Lake Clear that is not a single detached dwelling, first you should be amending the official plan to get rid of that policy. So if you were to put in a policy or try to implement a bylaw now that doesn't follow that policy, then you are in a position where you don't conform to the official plan, and
So
not
we-
be able to.
We would have to put in an official plan amendment.
Correct. So, and I hear, the council's, had this discussion, like, we already had it today, whether, like, yeah, could have an existing quarter acre lot on Lake Clear with a little fish hut that was built way back in the day, and now people are, out of that lot, or can build like a 3,000 square foot house with no other approvals or no hydrogeological study. And that obviously is gonna have a much better, much greater impact than putting a trailer on it or the current. So again, I understand that what the concerns are about that, like,
Is there a way to trade the RVs for a house? Like just trade 4 RVs for like one 4,000 square foot upgraded house? Wouldn't that benefit the ratepayers more? It's too bad we can't do
I-
that.
so.
Then you'd have to have 2 dwellings on.
I think Bruce gave us our answer though, so I believe that we should be looking for an amendment to the official plan.
Okay, so we've been at this for over an hour, and I know that your day ends at 4, and I know your staff days end at 4. Could I make a suggestion, Mr. Chair?
Mhm.
Could we perhaps send Bruce and his wonderful staff back? Bring us an idea of what an official plan amendment would look like, and then we'll bring you back perhaps in April to review the rest of this, because there are a few more items in this comprehensive zoning bylaw that I think that we need to speak to. This is obviously the most contentious. I think you've walked us through the other areas to give us a far better understanding, like the timeout clause and bunkies and all that, and I truly appreciate that. But I think that we've got to get this right, and we've got to get it right the first time. I know that this is something Merv always says.
Yeah.
This has been a long time coming. We need to make it right. And Mr. Chair, do you think that would be a good idea for today?
Oh, sounds great.
Because
Sounds good to me.
we're gonna be stuck on this, right?
Bruce just has one more comment for you.
If I could just point out one more, because it is another, so a lot of the policies that we've been showing so far, and a lot of the rest of them to come, a lot of them again are adding flexibility into the
Yes.
bylaw. And like, for example, there's provisions to allow shoreline structures in certain cases to decrease that 30-meter water setback as a right. So we can talk about that later, but there's just one more I did want to highlight. So as you're considering the bylaw, so there's one point that is going to have a impact on a lot of people. So now if you go to the separation distance section,
Yes.
so previously,
Yes,
this area, perfect, thank you. You'll see it's highlighted 300 and 500. So previously, this setback under all the provincial guidelines, the official plan was 150 meters for a pit and 300 meters for a quarry. It has now been updated to 300 meters for a pit and 500 meters for a quarry. And so what essentially this is for your mineral aggregate areas. So the official plan, your zoning bylaw, they identify these areas where there's a aggregate reserve, or it could be an existing pit where they're actually actively taking the aggregate out, or it could be actual, like just the resources there and it's being protected there for future extraction. And what this does is puts a larger buffer around those properties where you can't. So this provision in particular says no dwellings can be built within 300 meters around this resource, and then 500 meters if it's like a limestone, for example, or a bedrock resource where a quarry could be. But what we did do, you'll see under I, was we tried to buffer the impact of it. Buffer is the wrong word. Try to absorb, mitigate the.
Does the quarry have to own the land for the buffer?
It does not, no.
Does the court, it doesn't have to be active either, right?
It doesn't have to be- it could just be a resource, could be nothing there, it could just be bedrock resource there.
So I've run into this in the past though, and I know there's a lot of, and I'm not sure within Bonachure Valley, but I've seen it within other municipalities where something is deemed as aggregate, but it was within a rural zone of able to develop. So just for instance, I was looking at a property that was 100 acres, okay? But on that property, there was an aggregate area zone, and it took up about 2/3 of the 100 acres. Of course, that was the best place to put a building because it was flat and level. The rest was all hilly and stuff. But this type of thing, we're going to actually expand that. And now maybe it might take out the potential of somebody even building on that 100-acre
Yeah,
property.
that's why I wanted to highlight for council.
Yeah, so I just mean, it could almost take you right out of actually using your property itself for building a house.
So this is why we added point I,
Hey,
the very last I.
Wetland road.
yes.
Just let Bruce go through.
Sorry.
So absolutely, so and there's been a lot of lots created over the years that under that old 150 policy. And so now by increasing that from 150 to 300, there's a lot of lots that will now all of a sudden, could have been like a 1 acre lot that's completely within one of these buffers.
Absorbed.
Absorb. So what we did was add number I, so we said notwithstanding section 326 and then C and D, those are the setbacks of 300 and 500 meters. We said, so for a lot that includes a dwelling as a permitted use, and where that lot is entirely located within that separation distance. So that all of a sudden this new separation distance comes in, and all of a sudden a lot that was we created 2 months ago, and all of a sudden now we're putting this buffer in and it would completely cover that lot. We're saying that that separation distance under C and D will not apply, and that the construction of the new dwelling would be permitted.
I will also say, guys, that when I was on land use committee at the county, this is many, many, many years ago. There was, not in this township, obviously, a couple wanted to move into their parents' house and build a house for themselves, and they ran into a mineral aggregate problem. They took it to the land use committee at the county, and we actually allowed them to build. So there are some workarounds when you're talking about some of these areas that actually sterilize your land. We talked about deer yards at the county and prime ag at the county, things that actually sterilize the land. And we know that growth in this county that's the business we're in right now. So just, there are other areas that you can take this to.
So in this case, we recognize that the separation, that buffer is increasing significantly. And so if you have a previous approval for a lot, we're saying that section, that buffer doesn't apply, you'll still be allowed to use your property. It also goes on to say if you have like a large property, for example, 100 acres, and you have this resource or this buffer on your property, that provide that there's you should be building where, make your best efforts to stay away from it. And if there's a buildable area outside of it, then go ahead and build there. It's the dwelling, the very last sentence is, the dwelling is to be located as remotely from that aggregate zone as a lot will realistically allow.
Yeah.
And so it just, we recognize that this is going to create a new constraint on properties, and we're trying to,
Very much so.
mitigate it as much as, we can.
So Murray just had one question.
Yeah,
before
yeah,
Bruce leaves.
where I have a big problem is that buffer zone.
Yeah.
That buffer zone, as far as I'm concerned, is the responsibility of the quarry owner. If they can't sterilize somebody's property next to it. The sterilization zone should not be my property near it.
Well, a half a kilometer is a big jump.
No,
Yeah.
but this isn't only if there's a quarry next to you. This is if you have aggregate on your own land. So just,
Or
As
somebody
an-
else's property.
Somebody else's property
Somebody
would do
else's,
it,
yeah.
absolutely. No, that's encroaching on your
Yeah.
next door neighbor, absolutely.
yeah,
So it does go by the resource. So again, the provinces provide us with mapping of the resource, and the resource doesn't follow property lines. The resource is where it is, and the province has mapped it, and they say, keep development, or they call it sensitive uses, anything that would prohibit the future extraction or limit the ability of somebody to extract that aggregate in the future is discouraged.
Yes, but the buffer should not be should be the responsibility of the aggregate owner, not on a neighboring property.
Well,
You follow me?
I understand what you're saying, but
I mean, they can't put
resource
they
itself
can't-
doesn't follow.
the whole thing, Bruce, if you may answer the question, who put these aggregate zones in the first place? But like even the property I was looking at, the people didn't even know that it was zoned as aggregate. You know what I mean? So it all goes back to those, right? So it was somebody that decided that's a good spot for some gravel, or that's a good spot for some limestone. Wasn't the people that own the property. And then you do get someone that buys that piece of property, right? And if they don't do their due diligence and research it, and all of a sudden they're euchred, and so is their. I don't like it at all. That's the same thing as wetlands and deerlands and stuff. It happens to people that have owned property for years and years and years. And until they go to build on it, they don't realize that it was deemed this by somebody sitting in
an office in Renfrew County or wherever, or
Queen's
on
Park.
Queen's Park, that they can't do it anymore because someone decided it, and it gets decided by other people, not the people that are actually just trying to do it and develop it.
So how can we either prevent or help ratepayers that are gonna be impacted by this? Like, what's the next step?
Sure, well, these aren't new, they've been around since the eighties.
Well, I know.
It's been around, and like, so the rural Sebastopol official plan would have had these, and it's been implemented through your various bylaws, so this is nothing.
That's really coming back to bite us, eh?
But that's why this is-
Sebastopol
this is
official
so-
plan.
But, so the only thing that's changing in this bylaw, so they're already mapped.
Oh, I know.
Bylaw has it, so it's
Absolutely.
changing from the 150 meters for,
Right.
we'll say like for sand and gravel, from that would be a pit. So it's changing from 150 to 300 meters. So the increase is the buffer. So the mapping for with regards to where the resource is hasn't really changed that much. It's still going back to.
But I understand that, and that's why you said it, it happened back in the eighties, and a lot of people have had it happen without them even knowing on their own property. And because they only had a certain window of time to challenge it, if it was to go through, right? That was pretty damn sneaky back then. But anyway, this is, and that's why this is important to get this right here now too, because this is what's gonna happen. So if you have someone, and I'm gonna say, we've got quite a few quarries going on in our municipality, right? So now, say that quarry is on the edge of their lot, but they've only got, I don't know, say 20 acres of it as a quarry. But the actual zoning takes off into their neighbors. Well, it's gotta go 500 meters from where that zone is around it. So Merv's absolutely right. You're gonna sterilize a pile of property.
And somebody
by
else's
increase-
property.
And whoever's on it.
It should be responsibility, it should be
But,
responsibility of
and that's what I'm
the
saying, that's gonna really, that's outside of the zone. That's not saying the zone isn't a half a mile wide or 10 miles wide or 30 miles wide.
So Bruce,
It's
can we go
another
back to
500
Tim's
meters
question?
beyond that.
Is this a provincial policy thing? Is it an official plan thing, or is it our thing?
Yes, to all three.
Okay,
Yes. So yes,
You're killing me now.
it trickles down. So
you're
yes,
telling me.
it's provincial policy to protect the resource.
So,
provinces are-
Again, can we do an official plan amendment?
You can, so
We could try.
you can try. Again, so this is provincial, this is following the provincial guidelines that they've increased these separation distances to these numbers.
Debbie, please make sure you get that down.
And I just want to say, so just because it's in, again, there are, written right into the planning act are processes to amend and change bylaws. But to do this, you have to meet certain tests.
Don't.
So the official plan actually already includes criteria for saying if somebody wants to build within the 300-meter setback for a pit or within 500 meters of a quarry, here are the things that they have to demonstrate, and then it's put on the onus of the property owner to demonstrate that they're not going to be impacted by different things. And so again, it's a reciprocal. If you found that actually, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see it's reciprocal. So
It's not reciprocal.
so-
It's the province once again doing an overreach into rural Ontario and not understanding the rural lens. I mean, it's, anyway,
We need a break.
Anne was so kind when I was doing my severance to say, stay from the back of your property because our pond runs off and it looks like a wetland, but it's not a wetland. She gave me the parameters of what my severance should look like. But what Tim is saying is correct. Like, what if somebody bought that lot and all of a sudden there's mineral aggregate from my farm going, because my farm was built in 1853. So I'm just,
Totally possible.
right?
No,
And I mean, we've got rock that you can see in the yard, in our front yard. So, yeah, could you take that back as
But
well for,
because that would just be roll into existing if there's an existing residential lot there anyways. So like, if someone already had a house there, it wouldn't impact it technically.
correct. So the
Because it's like if their house burnt down, they could build in the same spot or whatever, because they're already exempted prior. It's just for any.
but
It's
there are a lot
really-
of vacant land out there. There's a lot of 100-acre parcels, 50-acre
Right.
parcels there is, and it's going to have a direct impact on whoever does develop or buy or use. Because let's remember, our population is, as Merv said, kids are coming back and yourself, we're looking at sleep houses, but we've also got a lot of area in this area where
people have had a 400-acre farm, but now they're dividing the 100-acre parcels up to their kids or whatever it may be.
Well, and
Right? And
the
it's
most-
happening,
The most
so.
desirable acreage right now is between 2 and 4 acres, apparently. I think it's just manageable and you build your retirement home or what have you, or your parents' home or your kids' home. Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
should we send Bruce? Send
In a few
Bruce
minutes,
back.
Send Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce, you really did, you did an excellent job of this, but I think that I knew as soon as I read it, and I'm sure all of council did, that, we still have some contentious issues. So if we could send you back with perhaps some idea of official plan amendments, and perhaps you and Annette can work together and we'll get you back.
Sure, so I would just put that, kind of saying official plan amendments, the township would be responsible for preparing those, and that would obviously delay any concerns.
Can you just give us an idea?
We can do that, yes.
I
Excellent.
guess one of the things I would probably know, between Annette and Bruce would just be on how many properties are, impacted and or sterilized by, if it did increase from 150 to 300. So like how, roughly how many?
Yeah, that would show on our mapping,
It
right?
would show on our mapping, but there's no way to have a number, like an easy calculation.
Not an easy calculation. I have to put it to my, we have very capable GIS staff at the county, so I'd have to see what type of.
But the problem is too, is future
Yes.
development though. Brent, at the same time, like that's gonna be another issue
Well,
with this.
Yeah,
And that's the thing.
It's gonna increase over time. It's an urban legend,
Yeah.
rural area. The difference is like how much is gonna impact off of this basis. And that's what I'm looking at. And then we know for the next time, if it does increase more, then it's just something we have to look at. We have to see how much it is impacted.
Yeah, and I think when we were going through the official plan, I can't remember Bombashire Valley's mineral aggregate, obviously, we knew that we had very few deer yards, we knew that we had very, very little prime egg that you touched on earlier, but mineral aggregate, I can't remember, so.
So, yeah, there is a lot of mineral aggregate in the township. It didn't really, when we updated the official plan, that was one of the items that the actual mapping of those resources didn't change. So
Right.
the resources haven't changed. It's the same resources that were identified.
But
Well, especially Grattan's.
there's a lot of them that are dormant, people don't know about.
Yeah, so the only thing I would add is that, being a rural area, that the extraction of resources is a key component for any rural area. And so whether it's mining, mineral aggregate, forestry, those are all, you can only get the resource where it exists. And to say, put that rural lens on it is, they are resources that can only be used provided that they're protected. And so what these policies are doing are making sure that the resource is going to be there for future generations. Even if they're not being used right now or actively used, is putting in a protection saying, we're not going to build on them. We're not going to do anything to make sure that in the future, if we ever need them, here's where the good stuff is. We're going to make sure we're not putting houses on them to make sure that we can get to that resource in the future.
Too bad we couldn't have did that 50 years ago in Toronto with all the prime agriculture.
And that just had a comment.
So the issue that I see with both the ag capacity lakes and resources is what Bruce is just saying, is that these are both resources and they are things that the province wants to protect. So going through an official plan amendment is expensive. And what's going to happen is if we do it as a township wide, is it's going to require studies for every single one of those properties in order to demonstrate why they should be an exception to the rule. So I'll discuss with Bruce and we can talk about what the options are. But I think what Bruce is saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is coming straight, these are provincial policy statements, these are guidelines, these are in the official plan. It's not that we can't apply to amend them, but as soon as you apply to amend the official plan, you can't apply to, well, you can apply, but you want to amend the official plan to go against the provincial policy. It's not that it can't be done, of course it can be done, but it's easier to do on a per property basis. So if I own a property and this buffer, or I'm on an ag capacity lake, and what I want to do is affected by the zoning bylaw, it's easier for me as the property owner to go and do an official plan amendment and do a zoning bylaw amendment and say, I don't want to comply with the 300 meter setback. I don't want to comply with the buffer for the 500-meter buffer for this. And and then have the county say, well, here's what you'll have to do to justify what the exception that you're asking for. But to do it township wide, you're basically asking the county official plan and the zoning bylaw to go against provincial policy statements, which it can't do. So you're gonna spend a lot of money to try and prove that, and then you're gonna have to prove it individually on every single piece of property. Am
Okay,
I
that's
getting that
exactly
correctly?
that's exactly the information I wanted.
Okay,
That is exactly what yes.
The problem I have is that we are already existing in a restrictive zone, like there's already restrictions in place. What they're trying to do is enhance them,
it's already done. Like
It's
the
already
province has already done
It's already
it.
done.
So
It's already-
you as-
but we haven't adopted it yet.
It
It
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
matter.
It's there.
Uh-huh.
So your zoning bylaw is to conform to the official.
Yeah.
which is already-
Yeah,
But it's not that you can't, it's not that you can't,
that's
it's not that you can't apply to be an exception, but if you as a property owner apply to be an exception.
More and more comes in every day.
It's more difficult for us to do it for multiple properties is what I guess I'm making a comment, but I'm also looking to Bruce to say, am I interpreting it correctly?
Just thinking that, and like, so there's already, we built into the official plan, the policies for saying if you want to reduce the 300 or the 500-meter setback, here are the criteria that you can do. And so for a very common one is, probably the most common one, though, look at it, is the resource already constrained by existing development. So you look at the resource and say, oh, look, 1, 2, 3, 4 houses already around. Nobody's gonna be able to develop this anyway, so therefore we're gonna go ahead. I just did, again, wanted to point out number I is that existing lots, existing development has already been approved. We are exempting them from that provision. So this is not going to stop somebody from building on their house, a house on their property within these buffers. So we've already tried to reduce that blow for existing property owners. Where this is going to come into effect is more when somebody's trying to do a severance or plan of subdivision. They're going to come in and they would be, to be honest with you, they're already impacted no matter what. The bylaw is just implementing the official plan. If somebody comes in for a consent or severance, they have to meet the 300 and 500 meters already, even though it's not in your bylaw.
And they'll find that out through the free pre-consultation.
That's correct.
And that just.
About $200.
And that just has one more comment, and then we'll actually let Bruce leave finally.
So when you say that, Bruce, if I have a legal lot of record next to a pit or quarry,
Yes.
I've already severed it or I purchased it, it's a buildable lot. And even though it's within that buffer, because I purchased a buildable lot, even though I haven't built on it yet, I can still apply for a building permit and I'm fine.
Correct. That
It's
is-
only the new lots that I'm creating. under
correct.
this
That is
section.
what I is saying.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, that makes it a bit
So
It's more
that's
a
swallowable.
bit more palatable, yes.
So people aren't gonna wake up on the day after the bylaw and say, oh, also my building lot is gone. We'll
Right,
still have we're protecting people's existing rights that they have now. So if you have a building lot today, you'll have a building lot after this bylaw is passed.
okay.
But I see the road it's going on, Bruce, and it just keeps getting more and more and more and more, right? So that's where it's a little tough one.
But I see as part of the solution. First time someone comes here to expand the quarry, do you own the buffer zone? If you don't, forget it.
Well,
Perfect, so we'll let Bruce leave, and then we can talk about
Poor
getting into a
Bruce.
new unfinished business.
Thank you very much.
No problem, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce.
And we are-
You take 5?
Take 5.
Yeah,
Take
that's
5.
fine.
Yeah, 5 is good.
Geez, right now, we can take 5 on a beer.
When I come back.
Well, they were gonna
Thanks.
crack the bottle of
before we move forward with my report and Jason's here to talk about the sand shed and the tender that came in. I see our new CVO who will be appointing later today and bylaw officer at the back there. So Daryl Wagner, I know you met everybody here at council and Debbie's here from leader. You guys probably know each other and
Yes, we do.
thank you for stopping in because I know you were out at a meeting today. So
Fun, day two. It's gonna be good. I'm really excited to be here. Really am.
So Debbie, Daryl is our new CDO and bylaw officer.
So that's replacing Mark
Yeah.
Yeah.
and Steve.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like 2 minutes from my house, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
Just don't get anybody your phone number.
That's the only
It's too
reason.
late, they already have it.
Yeah. They know where you live too, that's the
Yeah,
problem.
well,
Yeah,
I'm top, I can take it.
Get yourself a pit bull or something. Even though they're all loud.
No, that's perfect. So thanks for coming there, Daryl.
Take care.
Bye,
Take care.
Daryl.
Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Yes. Annette, perfect. So move on with Jason there.
yeah, so we're going to skip over the first section of my report. I'll come back to it after Kevin's report and move on to the sand shed tender. So we did receive tenders on March the 8th, and you saw the list. We received 2. The budget allocation for the sand shed was $320,000, and the lowest tender came in at $421,000. We did expect it to come in under the $300,000 because there is still cost for the base and the paving of about $150,000 for a total project cost of $571. So that is much higher than what was originally budgeted for. And Jason's been working on some other options, but also looking at the cost and how it can be funded and the efficiencies that it's going to save us. Because one, we allocated this out of modernization funding. So we would not have been eligible to apply for modernization funding 2 and 3, which together are about $165,000. We would not have been eligible to receive that 165 if we didn't spend the original modernization, but they let us apply and gave us those funds because we had allocated over $300,000 to the sand shed. So now if we don't spend the $300,000 on the sand shed, is that going to be an issue? Because that's the reason why we received modernization fund 2 and 3, because we had already allocated modernization fund 1. So that's one consideration. And the other consideration, which I'll let Jason talk about, is the efficiencies that it would save and whether those savings justify taking out a loan for the additional dollars over 20 years or something like that. The sand shed should last a fair amount of time, which would be about $8,000 to $10,000 a year in costs, and what our efficiencies would be. So, and then other options that he's looked at if council wants him to come back with those at the next meeting. All yours, Jason.
All right, so as everyone is aware, our biggest expense for winter control is salt. Our salt right now is at a set price because we locked in with the county till 2025. Every year it will go up an increase of roughly about 3.1% per year. So by 2025, our salt will be 9.3% higher than what we're paying right now. After that date, who knows what it's going to go up to. And if we can get away with using more sand, it's going to save our roads, which is going to save money in the long run because we won't have to do as much maintenance quicker on our chip roads. This is going to be a long-term investment. I think that my experiences here, it's going to benefit the township. It's going to be something that will help us in our day-to-day operations by saving us time, by not having to go out with 3 men for 3 days to sort the sand out. And, then there's always that option that you're not going to get all the chunks out of what you sifted through. And you're going to have downtime when there's a storm where you're going to get a chunk caught in the truck where the chain runs and you're going to bend the chain. Chains are very expensive. You're looking at 2 men for at least 3 hours during a storm, if that happens. You know, it's all downtime that I feel if council approves this would benefit everyone.
How many issues have you had this year, for example, with chain? Any? None?
This year, we've been fortunate so far. We've had a lot of trouble where the guys have had to go back and pump. So, you know, that's another issue where you'd lose, depending on what part of the township you're in. If they can't get the chunk pounded out, well, then you gotta drive all the way back, right?
So Jason, what's your recommendation? Because these numbers are startling. And I will tell the rest of council, I happen to be here after they opened the tenders, and Annette and Jason both looked like they were hit by one of the trucks. So I think I agree with you that this is a major investment and a long-term investment. So what would be your recommendation?
My recommendation would be to proceed. There are other options that I have investigated, but there is other protocols that would have to fall into place if they went ahead with. So like one would be screens on the trucks. So for the gentleman to get up on top of the trucks, then you'd need a railing for them to tie off.
All the rest.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So I had talked with you a little bit about it now, Jason. What about a stationary screen at the site?
Yes.
That could be manipulated with the front end loader that we're gonna have, right? Because let's not forget, the only time we need this is when we get to the end of winter, when we're running out of the covered sand that we have. So right now, we're capable of providing quite a few of the first stages of our months before we have to worry about the chunks. And if we had a stationary area, is that possible that you could back your truck under? No man has to get up on top and it could be all done with the loader?
I have been in contact with people that build these type of grates. They only come 8 feet wide, so it would have to be a specialty item built to be wide enough to back the trucks in underneath. And then to have it built, it would have to be a certified structural building or legs or whatever would have to be done. It would have to be certified to have that built. You're looking roughly possibly 50,000 for that.
That's still a lot less than
The
$500,000. And what I'm getting at too is not all winters will require the extra capacity of our sound shed.
Every year
But not to the point
no.
of building another whole, you know, for the amount, and for those who don't realize that those sheds, if we want to bring everybody up to speed, were used only for the municipality of Grattan prior to amalgamation, and then we've absorbed the rest of the roads, and then we've continued to use that sand area for it. But if it's a possibility, I would recommend going with something like that, because not saying it have to, but I would like to see an actual estimate on because I know steel's high and everything right now, but for something that we can possibly only have to use for the last like a month.
This year we were already putting it in.
Or a month and a half, whatever it may be, right, until it starts to get warm again. But I also, you know, I also agree with you on the excess salt on our chip. We can't do that. No, I understand that because it just destroys it. And that's why we went to the road of asphalt and hot mix for the last few roads, because we prolong the life of them, and hopefully, you know, in future generations of council, we keep doing that, because you don't have to look at them again for 30 years, right?
I think you were going down the road I was going down. I asked for the recommendation, but I was going to say, is there a cost differential in labor or anything else using some other technology? Or like, I think that we need to actually see the return on investment as far as labor time, quality of sand, and all the rest of it. But I didn't realize about the
Yeah, so
stationary screen.
as a lot of people know, and Jason knows too, I've worked around crushers and screening plants and such before, and it's something that I've actually had firsthand experience with. And I said to Jason, what about a stationary grizzly, what we call the grizzly, because when we're sanding in the bush, we have steep racks on top of the sand trucks back of it, right? And you dump it on and any of the coarse stuff falls out so it doesn't damage the chain, like he's telling you. But on a municipal level, you wouldn't want that because you'll have to have guys go up there and take them big frozen chunks off. They're basically like stones. You wouldn't want them to fall onto the highway as you're going down the road. What I had, we had discussed a little bit about a stationary grizzly, but where you back your truck under, you feed it through the screen, and then the way a lot of them are, even on the bush trucks, they have a hinge at the top. You grab the bottom of the screen with your loader bucket, and you lift it up and flip it down a couple times, and the stuff rolls off. Nobody has to get up. You're not putting men in danger, and the chances of the big chunks going through. And we have, another loader on its way, so it's we're not eliminating that as well. And I just caution if it's that much out of our budget that we can actually probably reduce things even a little bit more in this year's if we can do it for under 100,000, 50,000, whatever.
And then we're still using the modernization money.
Mhm.
So I think that, could you bring us back those cost estimates? Because I think that with supply chain issues, cost of materials, all of the things that we've realized through COVID, I'm just wondering if the sand shed is something to look at a couple of years down the road when things sort of even out.
Well, hopefully they do.
But yeah.
That's, we all hope everything goes down in price.
It's not going to. But anyway,
Not much, and,
Really?
no.
even if we
So-
go 15%.
But if we have someone that's qualified, or even if I don't know if there's any local welding spots.
There is, yes.
So, yeah, so if we can get somebody there to give us a quote or whatever, and like I say, just because it's my idea doesn't mean you have to go with it, Jason.
Yeah.
The thing is, I would rather see, something that will get the job done without putting any risk on any employees, and also be, beneficial to the taxpayer as well, as far as it goes with avoiding liabilities. That's it, that's all, And I'd recommend a good buckboard on the inside where you can scrape your.
So really,
Yeah,
all what it sounds like, all we're looking for to make our decision is just on other alternatives as well. If the sand shed was a lot more expensive, and I'd be interested to see also just on the impact of our grants, or if it, like, just what the comparison is and included in that number. So just maybe work with Annette on that as well, just so we can see the full, like, how much man time are we gonna save having the shed versus having this equipment versus, and the thing is we can put the one in as a buffer and see if it goes well, we can put in this other actual sand shed down the road. But
Because there also could be sufficient savings on our salt usage, by having this extra sand readily available.
Yeah, those are all things we need to know. But I mean, this is 150,000
A lot of money.
Over budget.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's,
No, and that's where I was looking at alternatives, right? Just to kind of keep you on track with safety of our men and also
but
on
I'm
providing
not
the
saying that
service.
I'm going to the alternative right away. I just want to see
No, you
the,
don't have to.
the
Yeah.
numbers as an alternative. The
Yeah.
thing is, if you are gonna save it in man hours over X amount of years, and it makes sense, it's no different than if we go with the alternative, well, it's gonna be probably galvanized material or whatever. It's gonna last
Have to be for sure.
20 years anyway, so it's like, which direction are we gonna go, and over 10 years, how much are we actually gonna save? So, is that's all we want.
Yeah.
And material is gonna keep going up. There's no way April 1st is gonna roll around and everything's gonna go up even more.
But
So
as to our alternative, the alternative stuff that's falling off of it's not wasted. We put that back and it thaws out and we reuse it.
So, and
So
that's
it's not like it's garbage. It's gonna be
Well,
reused. It just
but
saves
it's
the
also
chains.
it's also the comparison of the man time and all that. And that's
Absolutely.
why I want to see the numbers, right?
Yep.
So I think you.
That'd take you a little longer.
run, Jason, run.
Yes.
But
He has reason
to his point of, it'll take you a little longer to load, but only at the times it requires at the end of when you're getting
But
into
you
the
said
clumpy
you,
stuff.
but Tim, we already opened it up in January. You have 3 months of winter. That where you're already.
Yes, on certain
So
winters.
that's why I think we just.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, this year's been a pretty mild winter too.
We went through a lot of sand.
There's a lot of sand, absolutely.
And so.
Yeah,
And that's the thing. So
So that
that's why I think we just need the numbers and then we
Would
can
that
look
double
back
your
at the
time to
next
load the
meeting.
truck?
Yeah,
Would that double your time to load the truck going through the screen?
I wouldn't say double,
But-
but you're gonna spend more time.
Yeah, more
with
time at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay, but we can't make a decision in the
No.
void,
Yeah.
so.
Jason, you got everything you need from council?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trent.
Thanks, Jason.
You too.
Okay, Kevin, come on up.
All of our staff are on overtime now.
No, it's getting billed actually to other municipalities.
Oh,
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start out with the recreation report there. Not many big changes, just a few little things. The junior bees are finished up Sunday night, their last game. They're done for the season. Other user groups are using it till March the 9th, or till April 9th, I should say, and
do you have enough sponsors for the public skate?
we have one spot open as of right now.
Okay.
But that won't be an issue.
I got my receipt for mine.
Oh,
right
you
here.
already did
Tim
yours.
Shizen and Son.
Okay, I'll do another one.
Yeah,
I'll do the last one for you, yeah.
you brought it up. I wasn't gonna say it, but since you brought it up, I
You
did.
brought it up.
No, you pointed at me.
Oh,
She did. Yeah.
Perfect, Kevin. We'll carry forward. Will it be here until like 7?
Yeah, I'll make this short and sweet.
Perfect.
We're getting some smaller bookings at Eagles Nest. As things are changing, and opening up, so which is good. Smaller groups are renting it out. Public skating all this week. Our last on Sunday today and Monday we've had an average of 50 people, so it's working well. A lot of people are coming out, so that's good. Outdoor rink, shut the lights off the other night. We had a good run, but that's just the way it is. You know, so a few other little issues there with the snowmobiles going through. We blocked the gate, called OPP, did our part.
That should be over now anyways.
I was gonna say.
So it's a blessing in the springtime. Curling rink, we're moving forward on the tender. We're kind of waiting on this week on an app. That's kind of the direction where we are right now with the program. So that's good. The village, we're going to take the lights down and
It's time.
and Terry Hilke is doing some bluebird and tree swallows, I should say, around little birdhouse around town. So sprucing things up. One thing of discussion is beaver tails. It's contacted from the owner and he's interested in putting up on April 22nd, 23rd, 24th. Any move forward with this?
People love it.
Yeah.
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 And they're donating.
It was at Cobden last weekend, actually.
What are the dates?
You went to
again,
Cobden?
No, I drove
Yeah.
by.
Are you
Oh,
sure?
You wanted
April 22nd,
23rd,
23rd, 24th.
24th, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I'll contact the homeowners just to bring them,
Thank
let
you.
them know what's going on. So, and it's on 88% back to whatever group we recommend, food bank, clothing bank.
Very nice.
So that's my report from recreation. It's pretty straightforward. And move on to Dana's report. The zoning, we're quite aware of what's all the zoning on there, so no need to spend a whole lot of time there. The newsletter, putting one out in March. Emo community, the group's having a meeting April 6th. Shop local program, 12 businesses still participating. Easter hunt, April 16th, Centennial Park, 1:30, rain or shine. So hopefully it's nice and sunny, so everybody can enjoy the the hunt. Outside of that, that's pretty much no other funding applications. We're still putting them out. Summer programs, summer students, applications have finished up for me. So now we're just going over resumes and contacting the students, setting up an interview. So that's everything's moving forward. So it's,
Going with the swim program?
we are. I only have one applicant right now so far. So I'll have to reach out again, maybe to surrounding towns, see if we can get another person or see what's going to work the best.
Did you find something to fix up the dock?
Not as of yet.
Raft, I mean?
The raft. Yeah. It's still, it needs a couple days of sunshine to get cleaned out. So no, I have not. No,
Yeah, it's a little cool to be checking the raft.
No,
out.
no, it's still, to get it in, yeah.
To get it in, to get it fixed up.
No, I haven't did anything with that as of yet. So
Okay.
that's definitely on the list.
Perfect, so that's everything.
That's my report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kev.
Perfect. Have a good night,
Yeah,
Kevin.
you-
Perfect, and that's the rest of your report.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kevin.
Kev.
Hi, Kevin.
The financials are in your packages with the proposed budget, which is not passed as of yet. I don't know if there was any questions on that. So on to the budget. In the proposed budget when we were going through, in the recreation budget, there was $75,000 allocated to consultants, which included the $14,000 municipal portion, but also included the portion that was offset by the grant for the doing the energy efficiency studies for the curling club and for the arena, which we did get that grant approved. So that's moving ahead and looking good for us to be able to then apply to the federal government for improvements up to $3 million per facility. So that's exciting news, except that we cut that because our portion was only 14,000 and we had the grant in up above. So that means that we have to fund that from the levy. So
Or give back the grant,
Or
which is
give
not happening.
yes.
That-
So
Yes.
the question coming forward to committee for direction before we bring forward the draft budget to council is, do we want to maintain the current 1.4% increase in the draft budget, which includes the cut to the recreation and the offsetting revenue? Or do we want to cut an additional $35,000 from expenses to represent the budget that was originally passed at committee of 0.4% of an increase? The simplest cuts would be either the transfer to reserves for 34,847 for asset management, or the snow drifters post closure costs for $35,000, or we could leave it as it is and have a 1.4% increase, and then we maintain both of those and we fund the recreation grant.
Councilor Sisson?
Can we, because we still have, correct me if I'm wrong, with Jason Sanchez still on limbo.
That doesn't affect the levy.
It doesn't affect our levy at
No,
all. Okay,
that's
so
the
that was in.
modernization money.
Okay, so no, that's where I didn't know if we could use that, because if it wasn't going to that, because I thought there's only 170 of that, isn't it, going from a grant out of that?
No,
We still have-
320,000 was
Yeah.
coming from the grant for the sand shed for the modernization funding. However, yes, if council decides at the next meeting on April 5th to go with an alternative to the sand shed, and it's only costs 100,000 or whatever the cost is, we could then reallocate that towards the efficiency studies.
And that's what I'm getting
I
at,
mean,
because rather than take out of the other pot, we still have a little bit of stew sitting there waiting, right?
And, okay, so we will wait for committee's decision then on the 5th. And I will bring it back to the committee at that time to ask what you would like me to do to allocate the budget before we bring it back to council. Because I mean, it can come back to council the second meeting in April or the first meeting in May. We don't-
Until we get our
Yeah.
answers.
But the timing of this was just a bit off, right? So Annette wrote her report
Yeah,
And then we got the tenders. And
No,
yeah,
No, I totally
Yeah.
understand that, but
Yeah.
that's where we're still in limbo really with
Yeah,
our
we are.
budget. So rather than kind of go down something where we,
no matter what, I think we were all on the same page, and Debbie, this will make a whole lot more sense when you actually see the budget. But we came in really at a good rate this year, but now we've got to figure out where we stand, obviously, with a couple of other things. But we don't give back grants.
well, if we keep going, we might even be able to get people returns on their tax bill, eh? Wouldn't that- eh?
We can't pass our budget until our
Oh,
financial
of course.
statements are completed.
Yes.
Because we have to pass the report on the unbudget before we pass our budget anyway, so.
Exactly,
That was an inside joke. by the
really
way.
inside.
Yeah,
The zoning
And I saw
bylaw,
you too, by the way.
sorry.
Go ahead there, Annette.
The zoning bylaw, we had the presentation from Bruce, so there's still some work to be done. Likely he'll be coming back for another meeting, whether that'll be April 5th, 19th, or the first meeting in May. Those discussions continue. The chief building official and bylaw enforcement officer appointment. So Daryl was here. We did do that introduction, and at the council meeting this evening, there will be an agreement coming forward because as council's aware, Daryl Wagner was the fire chief, bylaw enforcement officer, and CDO for Greater Madawaska. So they are having a challenge going through some recruitment at this time and have asked for our assistance for some part-time to borrow Daryl for some part-time CBO. So they are not, he won't be doing bylaw, he won't be doing fire. It's just the CBO duties to give them a 6 weeks window to try to find somebody. So whether that's 1 day a week or something like it's, he's still going to be here the main time, but I think it's a nice.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's a finite amount of time.
Yes,
So-
it's not forever, 6
Right.
weeks and that gets.
And we're charging a fee for that. of
Oh,
course.
yeah, absolutely.
Fee for service.
The Roger Tower concurrence letters, so we do have a couple more. I think we've already passed 1 or 2 of these. There's a couple more towers going up. So the public consultation has gone through. That was in the packages. And so they're looking for those concurrence letters. And so I just need direction from committee whether staff can go ahead and release those concurrence letters or.
I was very pleased to see it. One of them, that 2 of the residents actually asked the questions and then were fully in support of them. I think that's fantastic. I'm fine with them.
Yes,
I'm
no, I'm
fine.
good with
I'm
it.
fine.
Everyone's good. Thumbs
Yeah.
up. Perfect.
You get some cell
But we're still
coverage.
doing the Zoom thumbs up.
You'll get some cell coverage.
Yes,
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
O'Connor and Wolf.
O'Connor and Wolf.
actually, I went out and looked to see where they're gonna put it on O'Connor Road.
O'Connor and Wolf.
But that's Rogers, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's
so,
not O'Connor Road.
But it's, I deal with Rogers
oh, yeah,
because Bell doesn't work inside the plant.
okay.
Perfect. Annette, carry forward.
So the last item that I have on on my report there is the election. So the province is releasing their forms as of April 1st. So I don't have them yet. I do have AMO put their guide out, and Dana is prepping the elections tab on our website. So we will have the AMO guide once the provincial forms and documents come out. We will have that. I do have lots of procedures and things to put into place, but I'm waiting to see what's coming from the province first to get that started. Registrations and nominations begin Monday, May 2nd. And the 25 signatures, so I did confirm that with the province, the 25 signatures will be required again this time. So just FYI, I don't have the forms yet, but those will be continuing for anybody who has 4,000 electors or more, which we do. And that is all I have to report, other than if you wanted me to touch quickly on the building permits at the second meeting in April. Daryl will be doing his bylaw and CBO report, but at this time, as you know, he just started yesterday and already had to review some of the zoning bylaw and had other homework and things that had to be done.
but he couldn't put a report together in a day.
So there was 8 permits issued so far this year for $234,000.
Perfect. Any questions? No. Sounds good. Well, we're just gonna keep on trucking her then, I guess. So, correspondence A, any comments? Perfect. So we'll go on to correspondence B.
I can't. think.
So we had the letter from the Ministry of Northern Development for Lake Clear as a natural trout lake. So that was in response to our question previously.
That was the only one that I had tagged.
I can't find it now, but that was a Dean, the presentation he's putting on. for new counselors.
Oh, Fred Dean, yeah,
Oh,
that's
Fred Dean,
correspondence.
yeah.
Fred
that's-
Dean, I listened to his presentation several years ago at Roma, and I really enjoyed listening to him, so.
Well, we'll send you there, Murph. Don't worry.
No, you don't need it,
Well,
it's on the internet.
Well, go ahead and
We'll
person there
send
for the
Murph.
next.
Murph, there's the wisdom.
I just thought, in case anybody's interested.
Yeah, that
I
was
don't know
the
if
poster.
have you heard him speak or not?
Many times. I know
Yeah.
Fred and Nigel very well,
Yeah.
actually.
It's split between, I think, 10 municipalities, so it's at no cost. Anyone who's interested or just wants to find out what it's about. If there's an in-person and there's an online, so you have to register ahead of time by March 23rd, but it is, it's there and it's available.
So, perfect. So besides that, anyone had anything else in correspondence B? Great, nothing in correspondence C. Library board update is quite quickly, just working on fundraising for this year and really just moving forward, and a couple of events are gonna be getting announced, but kind of it's nice to see everything has been coming back, more and more activities, more and more patrons coming in, and a lot of new users, which is always great to see and stuff, a lot of turnover in the community, so it's just nice the name's getting out there, and the town and the library board always acknowledges that they're given space in the letter a lot of time for the township letter, so they really do appreciate that as well.
Brent, could you let me know if there's another online or auction in general,
Yeah,
just so I don't miss it?
yep, they're gonna, I'll give everyone, because actually for the next auction that'll be coming up in the next, I think it's 2 months. It's gonna be all paid, like patron items, so all the patrons will be actually donating this time, because we've had a lot of requests for the 40 items to come from members and patrons and stuff, so which will be a little neat and stuff, rather than like businesses,
Yeah.
which will be a really good.
Tapping
initiative.
into a different market.
Yep, no, they have a fundraising committee, so it's going very well. Sand shed tender results. Any more comments? Sounds like we're getting
Gotta wait.
information at the next meeting. Rogers Towers concurrence letters. Any further comments? We had our thumbs up, so that's perfect. Draft zoning bylaw amendments and process. So we'll be coming back at the next meeting and we'll be going through that. And then the draft budget revisions. We already talked about that, and that's coming to the next meeting. This is great.
We really didn't solve
We're
any of
very
those issues.
efficient.
So establish the next meeting. It will be,
Oh, that's my.
so that will be April 5th is the next meeting at 3 p.m. Media session.
So weird after 2 years.
I have a question for the media. What's it like being back after 2 years, Debbie?
Well, I prefer dealing with people in person than like on the phone or, I've missed not being here in person, so it's very nice to be back in person. Thank you for smiling, Sandra.
It's great to have you back.
Great having you back there.
Yeah, it's just a lot easier to ask questions and stuff, like, I mean, I have been watching, like, on
Have you seen us
YouTube,
look
like,
at the
not all
desk
the
to see
time.
if you
Oh,
were
yeah, I
there?
know,
Yeah.
I did. Anyway, like, but it's a lot easier just to be able to be here and get the feel for what's going on, so I'm ready for the next stage and, the post-pandemic, I guess, that things are a little bit more open and, hopefully more things happening and all that kind of stuff.
Even with
so.
the pandemic, we still have a sense of humor then.
Oh, yes, yes. Mhm. That's important.
Do you have anything for us?
No, I think it was pretty clear, because I was gonna ask about like what was happening with the budget, and obviously, like, that's gonna be, for one of the future meetings.
We gotta get you coming back somehow.
I know, right?
Yeah,
You can't give them all the-
And I do think actually the 3 o'clock works a little bit better for our schedule at the leader too, so that makes it well.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so,
There you go.
good, thanks.
Perfect, thanks.
Great having you, Debbie.
There is no closed session, so we have a conclusion of the meeting. Could I have a Mayor Murphy, Councilor Sis, all those in favor? Perfect. Thank you very
Do
much.
you want to set us up for a couple of Zooms?
I'm gonna go zooming.
Yeah, because our public meeting says it's by Zoom,
At what time?
5:45.
Well, it has to be by Zoom for the, like,
How
because
can
in
it be
case the public
5:45?
wanted, when the ad went out, it was before council had
No, it
decided
was
that the
supposed to be
public
at
could come in.
5:15.
It's always at 5:15.
It's at
And
5:45.
that-
Why do we do that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, guys.
It's on it. I know it is. I seen it on the print, but why don't we go to
5:45.
But why did we go to 5:45? We were always up 5:15.
Because
I don't know, you can sit, you
Because
can
it's
keep
3
saying
o'clock.
5:15.
No, but we've always did our public meetings at 5:15 and now we're at
I
5:45.
don't know why.
Because
I
we
just
moved
read the
meeting from
agenda.
1:30 to 3 P.M.
Oh, we still have.
Well, barely,
Oh,
we barely had
lots.
time, but yes, we do still have time.
Yeah, but I would drive home and do.
But we wouldn't
5:30.
have 15
Five.
minutes because this could be a longer meeting.
five,
Sometimes we don't have time,
5:12.
and we don't know that, and we have to put the ad out 20 days ahead of time, so.
Okay, so we're staying, so we
Well,
don't
it's
have
up
to.
to you, it's up to you if you want to stay or not.
Well, 5:07.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I
my
thought
watch
because it
goes
said that we were by
You'd be pushing
Zoom, I
Murph to get
thought
home
we
for
had to be by
5:30.
Zoom.
No, we don't have to.
Yeah,
be by
I
Zoom.
have
We
to get home.
just did it by Zoom because the ad went